My flight got cancelled at 11:47 p.m. Not delayed. Not rescheduled. Cancelled, with a single cold notification that lit up my phone screen like a small disaster. I stood in the middle of Terminal 3, carry-on in one hand, coffee going cold in the other, watching every hotel app return the same word, unavailable. My battery was at 11%. My options were at 0. I typed one message to the only person I could think of, not because she was warm, not because she was kind, but because she was there. My boss. The woman who had never once asked me how my weekend was. I stared at the message for a full minute before I hit send. Ms. Rayhan. My flight was cancelled. Every hotel near the airport is fully booked. I'm sorry to bother you at this hour. That was it. Professional. Controlled. The kind of message that leaves the other person a clean exit. I didn't expect a reply. I told myself I didn't expect a reply. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Address, 14 Crescent Lane, Apartment 7B. Spare key is under the left planter. Guest room is made. Don't ring the bell, I'm already asleep. I read it 3 times. No, are you okay? No, that must be frustrating. Just an address, an instruction, and a period at the end of every sentence, like even her texts wore a blazer. This was Ms. Rayhan. The woman who had once returned a 20-page report with a single sticky note that read, Page 4. Again. The woman who took her coffee black, her meeting standing, and her emotions, wherever emotions go when someone decides they're inconvenient. I had worked under her for 2 years. In 2 years, I had learned 3 things about her personal life. She drove a gray car, she didn't eat lunch at her desk, and she had absolutely no interest in small talk. And now she was offering me her guest room. I stood outside her building at 12:23 a.m., carry-on wheel scraping against the quiet pavement. The left planter held a single brass key, exactly where she said it would be. The apartment door opened without a sound. I stepped inside, and stopped. It was warm. Not just in temperature. In feeling. Low amber lighting left on near the kitchen. A folded blanket on the couch arm, like someone had placed it there and thought about it. A small candle, already burnt out, but recently, leaving the faint smell of cedar in the air. I didn't know what I expected. Glass furniture, maybe. Color-coded files stacked on the counter. A framed copy of quarterly targets on the wall. Not this. Not a home that felt like someone actually lived in it. I found the guest room at the end of the hallway. The bed was made with the kind of precision that felt almost gentle. A folded towel sat on the edge. A glass of water on the nightstand. She said she was already asleep. But someone had put that glass of water there. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and thought, for the first time in 2 years, that maybe I didn't know my boss at all. I woke up to the smell of coffee. Not the burnt, bitter kind from the office machine that everyone pretended was fine. Real coffee, slow, dark, and warm, drifting under the guest room door like a quiet invitation. I checked my phone. 6:42 a.m. I dressed quickly, told myself to be professional, and walked out into the kitchen. She was already at the counter. Ms. Rayhan, my boss, the woman who made senior managers nervous in hallways, was standing in a gray sweater, hair loose, both hands wrapped around a mug, reading something on her tablet with the kind of stillness that belongs only to early mornings. She looked up. "There's coffee," she said. And then she looked back at her tablet. That was it. No good morning. No how did you sleep. Just, there's coffee. Like I was a plant she was reminding to water itself. I poured a cup and sat at the far end of the counter, keeping a respectable, professional, completely appropriate distance. The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. That was the strange part. It was the same silence as the office, but here it felt different. Softer, somehow. Like the same song played in a different room. I looked around in the daylight and noticed things I had missed the night before. A shelf of books near the window, not business books, not leadership theory, novels. Worn ones, with broken spines and folded corners. A small framed photograph near the kitchen, half turned away from view. A pair of running shoes by the door, mud still on the soles. She ran. In the mud. My boss, who wore tailored blazers and spoke in complete sentences, ran in the mud. "You're staring," she said, without looking up. No, I set my mug down. "You have a lot of books." She turned a page on her tablet. "You expected spreadsheets?" "Honestly?" I said, before I could stop myself. "A little bit, yes." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. And then, so quietly I almost missed it, she smiled. Not the polite, controlled expression she used in meetings. Something smaller. Something real. She hid it quickly, looking back at her screen. But I saw it. And for reasons I couldn't explain, standing in my boss's kitchen at 6:42 in the morning, that small, hidden smile felt like the most significant thing I had seen in years. The day passed slower than I expected. My rescheduled flight wasn't until evening, which meant 7 hours in an apartment that kept revealing quiet contradictions about the woman I thought I understood. She worked from home that morning, laptop open at the dining table, phone calls taken in a low, precise voice, every word measured and deliberate. The same Ms. Rayhan I knew from conference rooms and quarterly reviews. But between calls, small things happened. She refilled my coffee without asking. She slid a plate of toast toward me with the same expression someone uses when they're pretending they didn't just do something kind. When I offered to stay out of her way, she said, without looking up, "You're not in my way." 3 words. Flat delivery. But she said them. Around noon, I found her standing at the window, arms crossed, watching the street below with an expression I had never seen on her face at work. Something quiet and a little tired. Like a version of her that existed only when no one was supposed to be looking. "Do you always work weekends?" I asked. She turned slightly. "Do you always ask questions you already know the answer to?" I asked them, hoping the answer is different this time. She looked at me for a moment, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. "Not much. Just enough." "Sit down," she said. "I'll make lunch." She made pasta. Simple, nothing elaborate. But she cooked it the way she did everything, with quiet, focused attention, like the task deserved her complete presence. We ate at the dining table with the afternoon light coming through the window, and she asked me, for the first time in 2 years, where I was from. Not "What project are you on?" Not "Have you reviewed the brief?" Where I was from. I told her. She listened. And then, slowly, carefully, like someone stepping onto ice they weren't sure would hold, she told me something about herself too. And just like that, the woman I had filed away as cold started becoming someone else entirely. If you're feeling what I was feeling in that moment, that strange mix of confusion and something dangerously close to hope, drop a comment below. And if you want to know what happened when the conversation went somewhere neither of us planned, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part changes everything. The evening crept in without either of us noticing. My flight was at 8 p.m. It was 6:15. I should have been calling a cab, checking my boarding pass, doing all the small practical things that responsible people do before flights. Instead, I was sitting on her living room floor with my back against the couch, and she was sitting across from me with her knees pulled to her chest, and we were talking. Not about work. Not about targets or timelines or anything that had ever existed between us before this weekend. We were talking about the things people only say after midnight or in confessional booths, except it was barely evening, and neither of us had planned this. She told me about the city she grew up in. About a decision she made at 26 that she still wasn't sure was right. About the reason she took her coffee black, a small, personal story that made no logical sense but somehow explained everything about her. I told her things I hadn't said out loud in years. And somewhere between her story and mine, the careful professional distance we had maintained for 2 years simply dissolved. Not dramatically. Not with a moment you could point to and say there, that's when it happened. Just quietly, the way ice melts. You don't see it going. You only notice the water. She laughed at something I said, fully this time, not the hidden almost smile from the morning. A real laugh, unguarded and slightly surprised, like it had escaped before she could review it. I felt something shift inside my chest. Something I had absolutely no business feeling about my boss. "You're different here," I said quietly. She looked at me. "Different how?" "Like yourself," I said. "Like whoever you were before you decided to be so." I paused, searching for the word. "Efficient," she offered, one eyebrow raised. I was going to say armored. The word landed between us and stayed there. Her expression didn't close the way I expected it to. She didn't retreat behind the professional wall. She just looked at me steadily, with something open and a little unguarded in her eyes. "My cab," I said finally, reaching for my phone. "Your flight," she said at the same moment. We both stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. My phone screen lit up with a notification. "Flight ET-204, cancelled due to weather conditions." I looked at the notification. Then at her. She looked at the notification. Then away. "Well," she said, standing up, smoothing her sweater with both hands, the same gesture she used in meetings when she needed a moment to think. "The guest room is still made." That was all she said. She walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and stood at the counter with her back to me, and I understood, without being told, that the moment had been carefully, deliberately closed. We were back to being professional. Except we weren't. And we both knew it. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation, her laugh, the word armored hanging in the air, the way she had looked at me in that unguarded moment before her walls came back up. I told myself it was the strange circumstances. The cancelled flights, the borrowed space, the late evening honesty that happens when people are temporarily removed from their real lives. I told myself that Monday would reset everything. That she would walk into the office in her blazer and her certainty and I would be just another name on an organizational chart. I almost believed it. Monday arrived the way difficult things always do, quietly, without warning, simply there when you open your eyes. She was already in her office when I arrived. Door closed. Blinds angled. The universal language of do not approach. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop and did everything a person does when they are pretending to be fine. At 10 a.m. she sent me a project brief via email. Formal. Structured. Every sentence ending with a period. No reference to the weekend. No acknowledgement that 48 hours ago we had sat on her living room floor and told each other true things. I typed a reply. Professional. Matching her tone exactly. I hit send and stared at the screen. Around noon, I passed her in the hallway. She looked up from a folder, met my eyes for exactly 1 second, and said, "The Henderson Report. My desk by Thursday." Then she walked away. I stood in the hallway alone, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not confusion. Not hurt. Grief. Like something brief and real had existed, and been quietly buried before either of us had the chance to decide if it was worth keeping. And I didn't know how to mourn something that was never officially alive. I placed the Henderson Report on her desk at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes early, because apparently some part of me still wanted her to notice something about me, even if it was only my punctuality. She wasn't in her office. I set the report down and turned to leave. Closed the door. Her voice came from behind me. She had been standing at the window, arms crossed, looking out at the city the same way she had that Saturday morning in her apartment, quiet, and a little tired, and more human than she ever allowed herself to be at work. I closed the door. She didn't turn around immediately. When she did, her expression was carefully composed, but her hands, clasped in front of her, were not entirely still. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You don't," I said. "It was a weekend. It was unusual circumstances." "I understand." I was scared. 2 words. Flat delivery. But they cost her something. I could see it in the way she exhaled after saying them, like she had been holding them since Monday. "I don't do that," she said quietly. "I don't let people in. I built a very specific life that works precisely because it has boundaries. And then your flight got cancelled, and you sat in my kitchen and used the word armored, and I didn't know what to do with that." The afternoon light fell across her office in long, quiet lines. "So you buried it," I said gently. "I buried it," she confirmed. A long pause. "I'm not sure I did a very good job." I looked at her, this woman who ran in the mud and read novels with broken spines and made coffee that smelled like something worth waking up for, and I made a decision. I crossed the office slowly, giving her every opportunity to rebuild the wall. She didn't. "I'm not asking for anything dramatic," I said softly. "I'm just asking if we can have one conversation that doesn't end with either of us pretending." She looked up at me. Something in her eyes settled, like a door that had been held shut finally, carefully, choosing to open. "Dinner," she said quietly. "Not as colleagues." "Not as colleagues," I agreed. She almost smiled, the real one, unguarded and slightly surprised. And standing in her office with the door closed and the city outside and everything still beautifully, terrifyingly uncertain, I felt, for the first time in a long time, like something was genuinely beginning. Some endings are just braver beginnings in disguise.